This is Chris Watts, who killed his entire family in August 2018, and this is a story of how the FBI and the CBI extracted a genius confession out of him. For the full backstory, please see the video in the description below. Agent Graham Coder of the FBI. Agent Coder is one half of the A-team of Graham and Tammy, and in hindsight they both planned out a perfect strategy and each had their own role to play. I don't think anything in Chris's interrogation was accidental. They had a plan, and they were going to bust this scumbag. A masterclass was about to commence. Graham Coder started out friendly, but towards the end of the first day of talking to Chris, he had made it clear that there was a bunch of cops out there in the hallway who suspect him, and that Chris and Coder should work together as a team to prove that Chris wasn't involved. He doesn't even wear his FBI jacket as to reinforce their team facade. It's pure police art. The day ends with Agent Coder getting Chris to agree to a polygraph test. Chris doesn't even hesitate, and not once does he plead to leave the station to look for his family. Well, why would he? He knows they are gone. Even more reason to make Chris the absolute number one suspect in the disappearance of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste. Chris leaves the station and has what would be his final night of freedom before he spends the rest of his life in a square concrete shitbox. Chris comes back to the police station the next day, where for the first time he comes face to face with CBI Special Agent Tammy Lee. Chris is about to take a polygraph test and face further intense interrogation before eventually, well, you'll see. We may never have gotten a confession if it wasn't for the genius of Agent Tammy Lee. Although cool and calm on the face of it, and not overly confrontational, Agent Graham Coder let it be known to Chris that he is a suspect, and that there are a lot of police who are thinking the same thing. This effectively setting him up to take on the role of bad cop. Agent Tammy Lee, on the other hand, seemed to have adopted the role of good cop and came into the polygraph test and subsequent second interrogation with an arsenal of tactics, subtle techniques, and some very clever psychological sleight of hand. She acted warm, friendly, and non-threatening. I believe that everything she did to further her chances of getting somewhere near the truth was nothing short of a genius master plan, and all very intentional. This was a valiant team effort by both Graham and Tammy, and they complemented each other immensely. Both deserve so much credit for their work on this case, and they will forever be known as legendary agents, and their work has ensured that you will never see the light of day again. For me personally though, Tammy Lee takes a gold medal, and without her, I do not think that Chris would have confessed that day. Tammy Lee's arsenal of weapons. Tammy had 8 weapons to try and get the truth, or at least some of the truth, out of Chris Watts. They were a non-threatening and friendly, almost flirtatious, giggly approach. Her choice of clothing, showing her muscle, shutting Chris down and not entertaining any denial, suggestion and giving him an alternate way out, spotting the weakness, closing down the lawyer, false sympathising and comforting. Tammy greets Chris in a very friendly, almost flirtatious-like manner. She was quite giggly and smiley when she first met him, and she cracked a couple of jokes straight off the bat. This was probably music to Chris's ears compared to the way it was left with Agent Coder the night before, who made it clear he was now a suspect. I think this was a great play from Tammy to get Chris feeling immediately comfortable with her, and to not see her as a threat. I think her being female was also very important. Chris had a beautiful wife and was having an affair with an attractive mistress. And in recent times, Chris had transformed himself from an average, overweight guy to a much fitter and healthier version of himself, whose ego was lightly inflated by new female attention. To kick things off with an over-friendly and giggly female cop was no accident in my book, and I think that Chris was immediately hooked and felt a false sense of security from the off. Weapon number 1 had been used.
So go ahead and have a seat right here, Chris.
Sit on this?
Yep, I know. I'll explain what that is here in a little bit, but you don't have to worry. It's not on or anything right now. It's not gonna buzz you or anything. So how are you feeling today?
Agent Tammy's clothing choice is very interesting here. She chooses a striped black and white jacket or cardigan, which is very well known to be the colour worn by prisoners in old TV shows and movies. For me, this subconsciously shifts her from being on the side of law enforcement to being on the side of the felon. Chris will feel much more comfortable talking to someone who he doesn't feel is about to interrogate him. Add this into how she greeted him in the previous point, and we are off to a very easy start. In Chris's mind, at least. Note that both Graham and Tammy do not wear jackets with giant letters on the back saying FBI or CBI. The less formal this feels initially, then the more likely Chris will be to open up and talk. Chris's first impressions of Tammy were vitally important, and I think she nailed it. Weapon number 2 had been used, and the vibe of the room had been set. Once, and only once, Tammy had made Chris feel comfortable and at ease. She then wasted no time in using her next weapon, showing her muscle. She spoke about how the polygraph would work, and then reeled off her experience, her recent cases, her qualifications and her training, and the fact that she went to the best school in the country. She also tells him that if he had nothing to do with his family going missing, that they would find out today. Or in other words, if this was you, then we are going to catch you today. This would likely have sent a metaphorical rocket up Chris's arse, as now he knows who he's dealing with. But the scene is already set. He's agreed to the polygraph. Tammy has already been very friendly and put him at ease. So what is he going to do now? Run? The way in which Tammy coordinated everything was stunning. And just to reiterate my earlier point, I don't think anything was accidental in this plan. Chris's narcissism may have him think he can defeat the polygraph, but he now knows the pressure is on. Even if he is now fearing that he will fail, doesn't have much choice. Get up and leave, which he knows will make them even more suspicious, or confess right there and then, as she's already told him. They will know the truth today. Either way, the soft, easy introduction to Tammy quickly evaporates with this next weapon. Chris is pretty much stuck now. This was a masterstroke of a move from CBI agent Tammy Lee. Weapons 1 to 3 had been used.
I went to 10 weeks for training. I've been a polygrapher for about 5 years. I went to the best school in the country. So I want you to have confidence in the fact that you had nothing to do with this disappearance. Like, we're going to find that out today. Okay?
Once Chris had inevitably failed the polygraph, Agent Tammy Lee brings back Agent Coda, and the real interrogation begins. There is no more soft approach and light speculation. This is pure. We know you failed the polygraph.
It is completely clear that you were not honest during the testing, and I think you already know that. You did not pass the polygraph test.
Okay.
Where are Shanann, Bella, and Celeste? The next weapon was to shut down every single denial Chris had to make. Closing down a suspect's denial quickly is very much done on purpose. The more they can verbally deny something, the more they reinforce it in their own minds. At each turn where Chris tried to lie or deny involvement, it's quickly shut down by both Graham Coda and Tammy Lee. But what is special about Tammy here is how matter-of-fact she is. When Chris says, "I want everyone back," she says,
But you know they're not coming back home.
no credit is given to Chris's denial anymore. They had got him to take the polygraph. Not law-abiding, by the way. He chose to do it. Likely to come across innocent It's what an innocent man would do, probably ran through his head. He failed the polygraph and the gloves were off. We know you did this. Do not try and deny, because we know you lied. No more Mrs. Nice Girl anymore. You know they're not coming back. She's very sure about this. Closing down any denial quickly was weapon number 4. Also note how Tammy shifts her aura and vibe from friendly to serious and then back to friendly throughout this whole interrogation. She slips and slides into different roles at the perfect times. She's an absolute credit to the force.
I didn't lie to you on that polygraph, I promise.
I know you were being deceptive, so that's not even an issue right now. The issue right now is what happened to Shanann, Bella, and Celeste.
Having still not received a confession from Chris, Tammy deployed her next tactic. Tammy planted a seed in Chris's head by asking him, did Shanann do something to the girls that you felt you had to do something to her? This was an incredibly smart but risky move on her part, because to Chris, it gives him some kind of way out by admitting to a lesser crime. Okay, murdering your wife will still get you a hard time, but if you can convince a judge and jury that it was done in a rage because she had just killed your kids, then it would definitely lessen the sentencing. This was a win-lose situation for Tammy, and probably a last resort, because on one side, if Chris admits to killing Shanann, then they could arrest and charge him for her murder, and continue to interrogate him about the children without any chance of Chris leaving the police station. But on the downside, this would now give Chris a story and a reason for why his children are dead. Their mother did it, and I killed her in a blind rage. They may have got him for Shanann's murder, but he could spend his whole life blaming the children's murder on their own mother.
Chris, did Shanann do something to them?
No, I don't know.
I'm curious.
I have no clue.
After hours of interrogation, Chris finally shows his first bit of emotion as he says, almost holding back the tears,
Can I talk to my dad or something? Absolutely. I just need to talk to my dad. Like,
it looks as if Chris is about to crack. This was the opening that Graham and Tammy had been waiting for. Would he finally confess to something to his dad? On film. Chris talks about how his dad had flew across the country. Chris's weakness in the eyes of the agents was the bond that he had with his dad, and they honed in on this instantly. Would he be able to lie to his dad like he was lying to the agents? They are all over this like a rash and instantly use it to their advantage. They say how his dad had been sat in the police station all day and how he won't leave Chris. Tammy says, he's your best friend. Graham says, he deserves an answer. He would tell you to do the right thing. And to top it all off, Tammy comes in with, your dad is not going to stop loving you no matter what you tell him. It is manipulation for the greater good at its finest. This was a joint effort from both Graham and Tammy. It was Graham Coder who initially agreed to allowing Chris's dad into the interrogation room, so props to him. But the way that Tammy softly and tactically pulled on his heartstrings went a long way to getting Chris to fold. The way Tammy and Graham telepathically communicated here was amazing to see. They both knew that they had found a kink in the armour, and they bounced off each other brilliantly. They were onto something.
You need to realize that your dad is not going to stop loving you no matter what you tell him. You are his child, and he will not stop loving you.
Once Chris's dad enters the room, the agents leave them to it. They go to another room and observe what is happening on a screen, likely hoping and praying that Chris will crack and confess, to which they would have video evidence of. The win-lose risky seed that Tammy had planted earlier in regards to Shanann killing the girls was now going to be used by Chris. The very idea that Tammy had just given him was the exact story Chris told his dad. Now here is where the next weapon is used. Chris's dad mentions a lawyer. And what is stunning to watch is that within 9 or 10 seconds of a lawyer being mentioned, the agents instantly re-enter the room and try to get them off that trail of thought and to redirect the interview. They did have a murder confession, but they wanted him to admit to it all. Not just Shanann's murder, but all. Any further talk of a lawyer here would put the roadblocks up and make it much harder to get the truth. At this point, they unfortunately weren't able to get a confession to the girl's murder, but try they did. Chris would stick with the narrative for a good few months that Shanann killed the girls and that he killed Shanann, until eventually he admitted to all the murders, but only because he was offered a plea deal, whereby if he admits to all, then they would spare him his life. Tammy's next weapon was deployed as soon as she re-entered the room, following Chris's meek confession to his father. You can see that Tammy immediately starts to rub Chris's back and uses her nails in a soothing way to try and make him feel comfortable and at ease. Almost like patting a dog on the head and saying, "Good boy." It was genius. The man had just confessed to murder, yet here is a CBI agent showing him the first bit of comfort and soft human touch that he had received in days. Again, none of this is accidental. This is a true professional of the highest order, using sublime skills and techniques to do their job as best as possible. I believe Tammy rewarding Chris for his confession in the way that she did was her way of getting a full confession for all the murders. Well done, Chris. Good boy. Here's a back rub. Now I want the whole truth. Sadly, as we already know, he would stop here and stick with the story that Tammy gave him earlier. However, what I will say though, is that without Tammy's performance here, who knows if Chris would have told the agents where to find Shanann, Bella and Celeste. I truly think that Tammy's influence on this day, and especially the way in which he handled his confession with the reward of touch and comfort, went a very long way in Chris giving up the location of where he had disposed of the bodies. Regardless of a full confession or not, both agents were incredible, but for me, I don't think Chris would have cracked or given up the bodies without Tammy's involvement. On February the 18th, 2019, Chris Watts was paid a visit by FBI Special Agent Graham Coder, Frederick Police Department Detective Dave Baumhover, and CBI Agent Tammy Lee, who conducted the polygraph that Watts failed. Watts agreed to do this interview and happily chatted with them for 5 hours, giving the public a much awaited and highly detailed confession of not just murdering Shanann, but murdering his own daughters as well. Thank you for watching, see you in the next video, and peace out.